Broadcasting from the commodity capital of the world, Zurich, Switzerland, this is Insider's Guide to Energy.
This edition to Insider's Guide to Energy is brought to you by Fidectis. Go to www.fidectis.com for more information.
Welcome to the new mini-series, Next Generation Energy Leaders by the podcast Insider's Guide to Energy. My name is Luca and I will be your host for today. Chris and I, we talked about this project that we saw online called Solar Energy Races, and that really got me interesting. So we had one of our producers, Leah, she got in touch with an engineer who's actually part of such a team at the Solar Energy Races. And this episode really gets me excited because from our pre-call, I had the impression that our guest is very knowledgeable when it comes to the technology of these solar cars. And I'm really looking forward to learning how these things are actually built from one of the builders himself. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Damian Kobler. Damian, welcome to the program.
Yeah, Luca, thanks for having me.
Very, very cool to have you. So maybe I've already mentioned the solar energy races, but maybe tell the audience a bit what you do, where you come from, and yeah.
Yeah, so my name's Damian Kobler. I'm from Switzerland, St. Gallen, to be specific.
Yeah.
Well, I work at Buhler, which is a company in Utzwil, and in my free time, I'm part of the Solar Energy Racers team.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do most of the electronics there.
That's very exciting. So maybe just talking about Buhler, that's not actually an energy company, is it?
No, Buhler is a company which is mostly in the food industry, but it has also other parts. So, for instance, if you've eaten some bread or rice today, there is a good chance that it has been produced on one of the machines that we've built and sold to a customer.
Okay. And what is it at Buhler that that you do, like apart from this solar energy races? What's the electronics part that you work on at Buhler?
Yeah, so what I do at Buhler is I'm working in a place called Makerspace. So
Okay.
it's a rapid prototyping area.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody has an idea, instead of doing like a whole process that takes months or even years, we just quickly, like in a week or two, build a rapid prototype to test things out before like investing thousands
Yes.
or
Yes.
millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So even from these rapid prototypes that can be hardware or software,
Mm-hmm.
we can get many infos and many ideas out that help us in the later process.
That is so cool. So is how big is your team and what does your like daily work life look like in that case?
Yeah, we are a relatively small team,
Yeah.
so it's a bit difficult to say, but mostly we are 5 people because
Okay.
we have apprentices that change out
Okay.
like every 3 or 4 months.
Okay.
So we're 3 full-time employees and
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 apprentices.
Ah, okay. That's very cool. And how is it so this is your day job basically.
Yeah.
How did you become part of this solar energy races exactly?
Yeah, so that was actually a cool coincidence.
Yeah.
So in my childhood, I was always the kind of guy
Mm-hmm.
who dare build crazy things like an electric scooter, for instance. I have built one like 10 years ago before everyone was driving them. And
In your
so
free time?
in my free time, yeah, like as a 10 or 12-year old.
Okay.
And so people in the neighborhoods that I lived in, most of them would know me or at least have seen me, like driving this out in the street, or also with RC cars or RC planes, drones. And so I have a neighbor that also works at Buhler, and so the team was, or it was mostly apprentices that did this.
Okay.
So the team was rebuilt by apprentices,
Okay.
mostly in like the ones in the last year, like the fourth year of our apprentice.
Hmm.
And so I was in the second year,
Yep.
and so I wasn't offered like the chance or wasn't asked to
Hmm.
do that.
Hmm.
But like 1 year later, my neighbor reached out to me and asked me if I would be in to also help them build the solar car, and so that's how I got into the team.
That is very, very cool. So how, maybe for our audience as well, we've been talking about these solar cars now. Can you quickly explain what exactly it is, and what's up with these contests that happen around these solar cars?
Yeah, so the solar car itself is an extremely lightweight and extremely aerodynamic vehicle. So it's all like racing mode, carbon fiber, and a lot of newest technology.
Yeah.
So the car weighs only about 160 or 170 kilograms without the driver.
Hmm.
So it's very light. It's a one-seater. It is actually pretty impractical in normal life, but it's just really, it just doesn't take much power to drive it. And so the goal then is to drive at the races. Well, there are different races, but mostly driving with less power than other teams and getting
Hmm.
further or getting to the destination quicker than other teams.
Okay, so how do these contests, so as you said, you have this solar car, and we're gonna get to the technology and components of it, but the solar race, is it, I presume you have a destination and somewhere you start. What are the distances, and where in the world do you have these contests?
Yeah, so there are different types of races.
Hmm.
So the most well known is the World Solar Challenge in
Okay.
Australia,
Okay.
because Australia has got so much sun.
Yeah.
So there, the race is just to get from the north of Australia in Darwin down to the south in Adelaide.
Okay.
So crossing the whole continent.
Hmm.
So that is 3,022 kilometers.
Okay.
So it takes a solar car team about 4 to 5 days to reach this destination.
Yeah.
But there are also other races, like for instance, Solder in Belgium.
Hmm.
That is a 24-hour race. So there, the aspect of solar, like you could imagine, in the night
Yes.
there is no sun.
Yeah.
So there you are allowed to recharge the
Okay.
vehicle.
Okay.
So you just drive and have a bit of additional power from the sun, but the sun is not so strong in Belgium.
Hmm.
So it's mostly with recharging from the main power.
Okay.
And there are also races in like the Middle East, North
Okay.
Africa,
Yeah.
and in South Africa. There is
Okay.
also a race.
So, to what races have you already been? Where were you part of already?
Yeah, so I was in 2019 at
Yes.
the World Solar Challenge.
Okay.
So we drove from Darwin to Adelaide, but
Yeah.
we unfortunately didn't manage to get down to Adelaide
Okay.
because we had a battery fault, like
Oh no.
after 2,600 kilometers. But you need to know that for like the race in the World Solar Challenge, that is the hardest race of all.
Mm.
And so basically, everyone that makes it to the finish line is also a winner.
Yeah.
And the ones who make it quicker than others, those are the ones that get first.
Yeah.
So that's basically what the officials from the race say themselves. because it's normal for the World Solar Challenge that the teams, like only half of them, make it to the finish line.
Wow. So
And so I've also been to Belgium, the
okay.
24-hour race that was
Yes.
last year in 2021.
Okay. And you finished that one.
Yeah, I mean, there is a round course. It's not
Yes.
like from A to B. And
Yeah.
so you just drive laps on the solar circuit. So I think it's about 4 kilometers a lap.
Okay.
I think pretty exactly. And we made 250 laps, so about 1,000 kilometers.
And is that always with the same driver?
No, no, of course
Okay.
not.
Okay.
Um, yeah, the drivers they change out regularly.
Okay.
So, for instance, in Belgium,
Yes.
drivers need to change every 2 hours,
Okay.
and I think in Australia it's also like every 2 or 3 hours.
Okay.
Because in Australia, particularly, it's pretty hard for the drivers
Yes.
because it just goes straight all the time,
Yeah.
and so you get tired as a
Oh.
driver, and
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, just the fatigue is enormous there, and so
Yeah.
we don't want to drive the car off the road because the driver is asleep.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. So is in Australia, I presume, so at the end of a day, of a sunny day, um, how much battery capacity is left and how long into the night can you then still drive?
Yeah, so that's actually that is there are regulations
Oh,
that
okay.
tell you how or when to drive.
Okay.
So it's always like in you start in Darwin with a full battery,
Hmm.
so you are at 100% battery capacity, and you just drive the car like I think it's until 5 p.m.
Okay.
you are allowed to drive.
Okay.
Then you just stop wherever you are.
Okay.
So actually, you are allowed to overdo like 10 minutes, so you
Yes.
can drive until 10 past
Okay.
5.
Okay.
But the third or the longer you drive,
Yes.
you need to wait these minutes at
Okay.
the next morning. So the
Okay.
next morning you are allowed to start at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. Okay.
And so the rest of the time, like from 5 p.m. until sunset,
Hmm.
you are allowed to charge but not drive.
Okay. Okay.
So we just like adjust the panel into the sun to gain as much energy as we can.
Okay.
And also in the morning, it's the same.
Okay.
And
Oh, that
so,
is, yeah.
so the battery is like we try to, because we know in 5 days we want to finish.
Yes.
And so we just try to be about 80% battery capacity at the end of the first day, 60% at the end of the second day, so we can finish with 0% in the battery.
Ah, that is very interesting. Okay. That makes sense. That's so cool. So let's get a little bit deeper on this technology side. Maybe take me through the components of this car. It obviously has wheels, and you said carbon fiber, but what else is needed for this solar car?
Yeah, so you have the obvious part that, yeah, like in a normal car, you have wheels.
Yeah.
So until this year, you were forced to have 4 wheels. Now, this year, you're allowed to have only 3 wheels.
Okay.
Again, I think they banned that I think 10 years ago or so.
Hmm.
But now we are allowed to have 3 wheelers again. Then we obviously have like a chassis, some shocks.
Hmm.
But then the big part is the electrical system.
Yeah.
So you have a motor that is driving your wheel,
Hmm.
but that is only one motor at one wheel. So it's a hub motor. So
Okay.
you don't have a transmission like in a normal car.
Yeah.
You have, I think, it's like in the electric, like the e-bikes, where you
Yeah.
have the motor in the back wheel.
Okay.
It's basically the same principle. So we have just one wheel that is spin driven,
Yep.
and then we have a motor controller that can adjust the speed of the motor and the torque and all of that.
Hmm.
Then we have a battery
Hmm.
so that we can continue driving in the night or if there is a cloud.
Hmm.
We have got a solar collector.
Hmm.
So it's 4 meters or 4 square meters of
Okay.
solar area.
Yep.
and the charging is controlled by MPPT chargers,
Mhm.
so maximum power point trackers
Mhm.
that adjust the voltage and the current of the panels so
Mhm.
that you have the maximum power.
Mhm.
And those feed their power then into the battery. And I think that's basically what we have. Yeah.
That's very interesting. So you said you have you basically only have torque on one wheel.
Yeah.
What's the advantage to having to the transmission version? Is it just weight?
It's weight is one factor,
Yeah.
but there's a basic rule of thumb is the bigger the motor, the more efficient it is.
Okay.
And so if you could use a transmission
Mhm.
to drive like the two back wheels with one
Mhm.
motor,
Mhm.
but the transmission is pure waste of power
Mhm.
because you have some power loss across
Mhm.
the transmission.
Mhm.
And so the advantage of driving only one wheel versus like two motors in the back two wheels
Yep.
is just the efficiency that is higher.
Okay. Okay.
But it was possible in the last car that we built that
Mhm.
had four wheels.
Mhm.
There you noticed it as a driver that if you accelerated, that the car would turn a bit on one side, or if you
Okay.
would brake with the motor, then it would turn to the other side. So that
Yep.
was something that the drivers needed to know.
Okay.
But this time we have two wheels in the front and only one wheel in the back,
Mhm.
and so the torque is basically coming in the right place in the
Okay.
middle of the car.
Okay, that's very, very interesting. And I presume so your whole system DC based.
It is DC based, so it's like obviously the battery when it's full it has higher voltage, but it's a span from about 80 volts to 120 volts,
Hmm.
more or less,
Hmm.
and yeah, 100 volts DC nominal
Yes. Okay.
power.
Okay.
And so, like the only part that is AC is after the motor controller because
Okay.
it converts the DC to modulated DC slash AC that
Yeah.
is then used by the motor.
So that's I think you call it a pulse width modulator or something like that. Is that right?
It works with pulse width modulation,
Hmm.
but that's like only the thing that drives the small chips that then control the big current.
Ah.
And they're well, it is PVM based
Hmm.
with our last car,
Hmm.
and we are currently developing our own motor controller.
Okay.
And so it uses FOC technology, field
Okay.
oriented control.
Okay.
And so there you try to get the current that is fed to the motor to look as much as a sine wave as possible
Hmm.
to gain some efficiency.
Okay. That is very, very fascinating. Um, so for the battery, can you quickly, I presume it's lithium ion,
It is.
and what capacity does the battery have, and what's like the peak power of the solar panels, just if you have the numbers.
Yeah, so the peak power of the solar collector,
Hmm.
that is depending on the sun, but at max we have about 1100 or 1200 watts.
Hmm.
So a bit over 1 kilowatt.
Hmm. Hmm.
So with 4 square meters.
Okay.
And so the power of the battery or the capacity of the battery that is regulated
Hmm.
by the regulations of each
Okay.
race.
Okay.
But it's basically on all races you are allowed to have 20 kilograms
Hmm.
of cell weight.
Hmm.
And with the current lithium ion technology, you get to almost 5 kilowatt hours.
Okay. Okay. Very interesting. Do you know what kind of lithium ion technology you're using? Is it this NMC or do you know specifics?
I don't know super specifically, but
Yeah.
I just know the cell type. It's these round cells, the
Yeah. Okay.
21700
Okay. Yeah.
from
Yeah.
Samsung
Okay.
that
Very
these
interesting.
ones are using.
Cool. Um, yes, that is very interesting. And you are using now a three-wheeled, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So if say you start in the morning, um, can you then basically run fully on only solar power? I presume not. You are using some of the battery, obviously. But how much of the battery can you recharge during a whole day with the power of the sun?
Yeah, so that is actually a whole field for itself, the race strategy.
Okay.
So that's yeah, in races like Australia, it's pretty difficult task to make
Yeah.
because you need to know so many factors like the weather,
Uh-huh.
wind, the elevation that you have on each day,
Okay.
like what are the conditions of the road, stuff like that. But it's that in the morning you are when you stand still when you're not driving, then you try to charge the battery a bit,
Hmm.
like on the early rays of the sun.
Hmm.
Then at 8 o'clock you drive, and then of course you need a bit more power from the battery to sustain the speed that you want.
Hmm.
But in the like at noon at 12 o'clock, yeah, we get about 11 or 1200 watts in, and then we can charge the battery up a bit. But there are control stops. I think in Australia there are about 9 control stops
Okay.
where you need to wait for 30 minutes,
Okay.
and there you are allowed to charge.
Hmm.
And so when you then adjust the panels at these control points, you get 12 or
Mm.
sometimes 1300 watts in.
Yeah.
And so there you can charge the battery to drive like in the evening.
Hmm.
And the control stops, they're there for the chase and lead vehicles because you need to drive in a convoy. So you always have like one normal gasoline car in front, then the solar car, and one normal gasoline car in the back. And because they need to refill their tanks, you have these control stops.
Okay. That is quite, let's say, ironic somehow. Um,
It is. It is. Yeah. That's also something when you mention it to people, they are like, okay, that doesn't sound really good to the nature.
yeah.
But yeah, it's the price you need to pay. But there are some technologies that have developed in these solar races that are now used in other fields of the industry
Mm.
to avoid CO2 emissions.
Yeah, obviously it's to drive the technology forward, right?
Exactly.
Um, what was I gonna ask? I was gonna ask, so you're not allowed to drive, or is it you're not allowed to drive while charging the battery, or is that part of the hardware how it works that you cannot drive while charging?
No, you can drive while charging.
Oh, you can.
That is entirely possible.
Okay. But
So
your
while
battery is
you're
just empty, and then you need to wait to recharge basically at some point of the day.
no, you need to wait at the control stops.
Okay.
There, you need to wait, but you are allowed to charge. But
Okay.
yeah, you can basically charging is like always allowed.
Hmm.
Just driving is only allowed from 8 to 5 p.m.
Hmm.
and you need to wait at the control stops for 30
Okay.
minutes.
But apart from the control stops, do you usually drive the whole day? So is there no point other than the control stops where you?
That is the goal of each team
Okay.
to drive the whole day
Hmm.
because at the end, having a constant speed
Mm.
is better than having like a higher speed but draining your battery and then need to drive on the side to recharge.
Okay.
But that's mainly because of the aerodynamics,
Yes.
because the resistance of the air
Yeah.
is a lot higher at like 90 kilometers an hour than 70,
Yeah.
and so it's favorable to
Yeah.
drive at a constant speed
Okay. Yeah.
the whole
Very
day.
cool. Yeah. So you talked about your battery mishap that you had in Australia. Maybe maybe, or if you're allowed to, tell us what happened there exactly.
Yeah, so that is actually a good question because we are under today what it was. It was the battery management system, the BMS. So you need to have one that the purpose of it is that it would surveil the whole battery, like all the currents, all the voltages of each cell. And if there is anything wrong, it needs to shut down the battery. And so we've had that. It shut down our battery, and we didn't know what was the cause for the shutdown.
Okay.
But that basically is or was a problem that we had in general because the team, the solar energy races team, it was composed of a lot of people, but that was before like our part, and so this team then they like finished it. They said we're done with the project, but there was one guy that re redid it with the apprentices. And so the problem then was that nobody knew how the electronics would work exactly. And so it was pretty challenging for us to know the faults that were.
Okay. Okay.
But that is also why we are now, for the new car, building a whole new electronic system so that we have the knowledge in
Okay.
our heads.
From ground up, or from scratch, basically.
Exactly, yeah. Because
So.
the older technology it was like 2010s technology, and you could notice that. I mean, the computer system, microcontrollers, they have developed a lot in the last 10 years. And so you would notice that there. Because, for instance, the indicators, depending on how busy the whole control system was, the indicators would flash faster or slower.
Okay.
So thinking about this in 2022 is pretty crazy.
Yeah. So it gets pretty hot in Australia, right? How did you cool your battery? How did that work? Was it just air cooling, or how did you do this?
Yeah, the battery is entirely cooled by the air. So
Okay.
it has like two fans on top that the battery management system controls. And so it has temperature sensors, and if it rises like above 40 degrees, it will cool the batteries. But the batteries is actually not the problem where the heat is doing the most difficulties. That's for the drivers because you don't have an air conditioning in there because it would just use power and be a loss in weight. And so you don't have air conditioning, and it can get hot like in a sauna in these cars
Okay.
if you're driving them in the sun.
Okay. Yeah. Comparing Buhler's solar car with others, are there any, I don't know, software or hardware components that really stick out or that are different in what you do compared to others?
There, when we were there at the World Solar Challenge in 2019, there was a big difference between like our car and the car of the top teams because they had some space grade gallium arsenide solar cells that are normally used on satellites or like the ISS. And so they cost, I don't know how much, but pretty much they're not usable like for any big scale thing.
Yep.
But yeah, for this purpose, they had that, and we just financially we couldn't afford them. Like many teams, there were about I think only seven or eight teams that had this gallium arsenide, but they have an efficiency of about 37% compared to the about 22% that the silicon solar cells, the normal ones, have. But they were only allowed to have 2.5 square meters.
Okay.
But so like this, the calculation works out that you have about the same power input, but with only a 2.5 square meter solar collector, the car is a lot smaller and lighter.
Okay.
So that was one of the big difference. Another small difference is that some teams had a variable field motor
Okay.
where they could slide in and out the motor windings to get some higher top speed.
Okay.
And so those are about the differences that there are. There
Okay.
are some other, but they're not so big.
Okay. That is very, very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing all these insights. Maybe what motivate? I mean, you're doing this in your free time. And that's a question that we ask all our guests on this mini series. Um, what motivates you to do this? I mean, this is, as I said, this is in your free time, and spending here blood and sweat. Why do you do this?
Because it's fun. It is tremendously fun.
Mm,
Also, being together as a team
mm,
of like 10 or 15 people,
mhm,
it's kind of a good size, and all the peoples are from a technical background, so you can have great discussions about this.
mhm,
And also, if you're working with this car like for 1 or 2 years, and if you can do the first driving then, or
mm,
also drive it, yeah,
mhm,
in Solder or in Australia,
mhm.
that's it's a great feeling.
Yeah.
And it also, like, I hope that some of the technology that is developed during the races can be used in other fields.
Mhm.
So that is a cool feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Like what fields?
Yeah, it's like excitement.
Yeah.
It is a happiness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That,
sometimes it's really frustrating,
yeah.
but it mainly is a very good feeling. Yeah,
Yeah.
feeling
Cool.
of accomplishment.
Yeah, that's nice. And also, what we also always ask is, um, so you've been on this team for quite some time now. You've been doing these electronic works. What guidance would you give, I don't know, to your few years younger self or someone coming up? What recommendations do you have just generally on career choice and doing what they do?
Yeah, so for me as an engineer,
Mm,
I think that's a pretty cool field to work
yeah,
in
yeah,
because you are able to solve problems.
yeah,
And so that is a great thing to do.
yeah.
But I think there's something going on with innovations today.
Hmm.
So it's really difficult also for us here at Buhler to know what is like a real innovation,
Yeah.
because an innovation, like, it doesn't mean putting flat screens on something or coming out with an app,
Hmm.
but innovation should be solving problems from other people that they have in, I don't know what industry,
Hmm.
but just to be able to solve their problems for them.
Hmm.
And some of the solutions may include flat screens or apps, but
Hmm.
some of them may not. Sometimes the solutions are pretty simple but
Hmm.
have a big impact on the
Hmm.
daily life of people.
That is fascinating. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences with us. Yeah, we're coming to an end. It's been a great pleasure hosting you. Thank you very much, Damien.
Thank you, Luca. My pleasure.
um, I'm looking forward to hearing what Buhler and how you're performing at the next solar races in the future. And for our listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. And remember to like and subscribe to our show. And we're looking forward to talking to you soon. Thank you and goodbye.